What is going on, everybody? I am back today to talk about a movie that I feel like everyone on the internet has been discussing for like the past month and a half. And unfortunately, my life got crazy busy and I was not able to see this in the theater like I wanted to, but it is now available for pay for rental on like Amazon and all of those different services. And this movie stars Kyle Gallner, who I'm actually a really big fan of. I feel like Kyle throughout the past several years, and he's been in the industry for a while, but he just keeps churning out really fantastic performances. And even if I don't like the movie, I always really appreciate his performance. I just think he's a very committed actor, and he clearly wants to make specific styles of movies, and he really likes horror. And I think that it's cool to have someone who's so passionate about the industry, and he's been promoting this movie really heavily. And I think that that's really awesome when you make something, you want to get it out there and you want people to see it. And so because of all that drive and determination, I was really looking forward to watching this movie, and the film I'm going to be discussing with you today is Strange Darling. Strange Darling is directed by JT Mollner. Nothing is what it seems when a twisted one-night stand spirals into a serial killer's vicious murder spree. So, as I said, I was really excited to watch this movie, especially with all of the hype surrounding it and all the people kind of just pumping it up and saying how great it is. And this is unfortunately one of the biggest disappointments of the year for me. I am honestly kind of surprised by the immense amount of praise that this movie is getting. And don't get me wrong, this movie is not terrible by any means. It's serviceable enough to a point. It is beautifully shot and there's some really excellent performances. But everything else about this movie is so incredibly hollow. The script is very juvenile, the dialogue is poorly written, and there are some things towards the third act involving the subject matter that the longer I think about it, the more questionable it is. And I don't necessarily think that the director or people involved had ill intentions, but I think the structuring of the scene and the way that they're trying to deliver it in particular, it came off leaving a sour taste in my mouth. And despite that in particular thing, which I'll talk about later on in the review, there's just so many other elements of this film that just don't work for me. And I'll talk about it as a whole when I break the movie down. And I'm going to state this right now because people have been talking about it like crazy. It is really hard to talk about this movie as a whole without spoiling it. So initially, I'm going to give you a very brief plot description, tell you a little bit about my thoughts, and then move on to spoilers. And I will give you a warning before I get into that territory, because if you want to see this, go in blind, watch it without knowing anything, and then you can come back and watch my review later on with the spoilers. But right now I'm going to go into my spoiler-free thoughts. So at the beginning of the movie, we are introduced to two characters, the lady played by Willa Fitzgerald and the demon played by Kyle Gallner. And the very first shot of the movie is the lady running away from the demon, and we get title card sequence that tells us it was shot on 35mm film, and then you get a very similar to like Texas Chainsaw Massacre title crawl saying that there was this prolific serial killer that was on their reign of terror through this period of time, and that the film was going to showcase things that happened during that time period in a 6-chapter saga. Well, as the film progresses, we see early on the first chapter we're jumped into is chapter 3. And so the film is telling us the story in a non-linear fashion. And the entirety of the film, very simply, is following these two characters as one is chasing after the other, and us progressively learning more and more about it as the movie goes along. So like I said, I was not a fan of this movie, unfortunately, but I want to start with the positives because I think there is a lot to praise. The cinematography here is arguably some of the best of the year. They say that it was shot on 35mm at the beginning of the film, and you can definitely tell. This thing is vibrant and beautiful, and there's so much attention to detail in every single frame of this movie. The colors just really bounce off the screen, which one of my biggest complaints as a film lover over the past several years is how desaturated so many movies are. They just look dull and lifeless. And if you're going for that thematically, it makes sense. But in this movie, it's going for bombastic, chaotic thriller, and it wants to be bold and brash brash and in your face. And I think playing with those colors and really working with the setting and the scenery and the production design makes a very easily immersive experience. The world, it's really easy to suck yourself into the world and want to know what's going to happen next, which is probably my favorite part of the movie, is the cinematography, which was wild to learn that actor Giovanni Ribisi was the cinematographer, who I think they said this was his first time doing cinematography, which is just absolutely incredible to me. The movie looks beautiful. There's a lot of really excellent shots in it. So that's one of my biggest compliments I can pay the film. Secondly, the performances here. Kyle Gallner, as I said earlier on, he's awesome. He's great in this movie. He lives and breathes this character. There's a lot for his character to do, and I feel like the shifts that he goes through, especially in the different acts, he's great. He just really commands the screen. He delivers his dialogue really well, and I just really like him as a performer. Willa Fitzgerald is incredible in this movie. I was blown away by her performance. I think just the way she also commands the screen, the way she moves her body, just all of these little things that go along with her performance really make her a captivating actress. And all the praise that she's receiving for this movie, she 100% deserves. But past that point, I have a ton of complaints, and I'm going to start off with my spoiler-free complaints. The script in this movie, the dialogue in particular, is so incredibly cringy. The scene at the beginning where the two characters are speaking to one another, Willa Fitzgerald is talking about giving out her number, and she says like digits like 5 different times. Everything about their dialogue is just so unnatural and really just poorly thrown together. It felt like a lot of times it was trying to be a Tarantino knockoff, but the dialogue's never witty or intellectual enough to feel like a Tarantino film. And I'm not even the biggest Tarantino fan, but it just felt like it was so copy and paste, and there just wasn't really anything interesting or enthralling about the dialogue these characters are having with one another, which makes the movie a bit of a chore to get through. I feel like for 90 minutes, this thing is paced pretty poorly. There's a lot of dead runtime in this, especially like scenes where it's like cat and mouse chase, where you're just getting the same repetitive speaking of dialogue again, there's a scene where Kyle Gallner's character is like saying "here kitty kitty," and it doesn't necessarily make sense in the context of the film with what's going on with his character and what we learn on later on. It's just absolutely baffling, some of the decisions that are made surrounding the dialogue in this movie. I really don't like the nonlinear structure, and I'm a huge fan of avant-garde cinema. I love surrealism. I love when you're doing something different, but like when you look at some of the best films that tell their stories non-linearly, you can do it with a purpose. This movie, it doesn't feel like there's any purpose in telling the story in a non-linear fashion other than the surprise twist in the film, which is what I'm going to talk about when I get into spoiler territory. The twist in this movie is the most predictable, by the numbers twist I've seen in a movie recently. Like, there's so many people leaving comments that they were shocked and completely and totally taken aback by what the twist in this movie is, and I just wanted to say, like, is this the 10th movie you've ever watched in your life? Because if you've seen movies and you've watched film over the past 30 years plus, there have been so many movies that have done this exact same reveal, but far, far better. And that's one of the things that irked me. When your entire marketing is go in blind, don't let anybody tell you, and this is how formulaic and lazy the reveal is. It just kind of took away everything about the 6-part chapter structure, all of those things that went into it, and it just felt really by the numbers, which is the most I can say about this movie. It feels like it's by the numbers. And to talk about some of my other qualms, I have to go into spoilers. So if you haven't seen this movie and you're interested in it, skip over this. I'm going to talk about the spoilers now. So here we go. So the spoiler of the movie, big surprise, is the lady is the serial killer, not Kyle Gallner's character. Kyle Gallner is actually a police officer, and when they revealed it, I was like, I guessed this in the trailer when I was watching it before I went in to see the movie. And the entire like inciting incident of the film is the two of them are hooking up. She's into role play, but she wants to be roughed up, and there's all this stuff about consent in the movie early on. And as the film progresses, it's a cat and mouse chase of this police officer who's almost killed by this serial killer, and he's trying to stop her, which sounds interesting in theory, until it's not. It's just the same repetitive scenes over and over again. I really love the intro to the movie. I think it's fast paced. The sound design is incredible. There's so much going for it until it becomes stale. And then they add characters in like Ed Begley Jr. and his wife that don't really add much into the movie. They put a few characters here and there, but neither one of these leads, even Willa Fitzgerald, who, like I said, is commanding the screen, her character is bland. There's not enough about either one of these characters for me to really care all that much. And I get the director would probably argue that it's about the feeling and the chase, but even that, when it becomes the same scenes and some of the characters are just making nonsensical decisions, it's impossible to stay completely and totally invested. Which then gets into one of my biggest issues with the movie, which I've seen a lot of people talking about, and I'm glad it's being discussed. And like I said, I don't necessarily think that there's ill will, I just think it's handled incorrectly. This movie comes across as blatantly misogynist in probably the most disgusting way I've seen in a movie in quite some time. There's a scene towards the third act of the film where Kyle Gallner's character gets the lady, Willa Fitzgerald's character, captured, and someone gets killed. And after they get killed, these police officers show up, and she sets herself up to where she's got her pants halfway pulled down and she's acting like she has been assaulted. There's a female police officer and a male police officer that come in. The female police officer immediately wants to help her and says she's in distress, she's in trouble, something happened, let's get her out of these handcuffs and make sure she's okay. The male police officer's like, wait, whoa, we've got to check this out, we don't know what's going on. And so much of that sequence feels like it's a shot at people questioning women who have said they have been assaulted and harmed. And that's how it comes across in the scene. It's because of the way the dialogue is written, it's the way that it's approached. And I think that in a time period we're living in now, where women are coming forward who have been assaulted and taken advantage of in their career fields, to make a scene that feels so incredibly distasteful towards women. And I get the point of the movie is that the villain is a woman, but there have been so many amazing movies where women are the villains that it doesn't come across as this sour and distasteful. I think of just in the past couple years, David Fincher's Gone Girl, incredible. Rosamund Pike's performance, one of the best I've seen in a movie in quite some time. That movie did not leave a bitter taste in my mouth the way this does, and especially with all the conversations surrounding consent earlier on in the film. You think it's going to go an entirely different direction until it doesn't. And that's what really frustrated me about that element of the movie, is the dialogue surrounding it, the approach, the way the dialogue is delivered. It's just really off-putting. And like I said, I don't necessarily think there's any ill will there. I just think the way the dialogue is written and the way that they approach it, it comes across in bad taste. And I think you have to factor those things in when you're watching a movie, because you can vilify women, you can vilify queer characters. There's a way to do it and be tasteful about it, and to do it in a way that doesn't come across as kind of gross. And I've seen a lot of comments about like it's a man that's directing it and all of these different things. And like I said, I don't necessarily think there's any ill will here, but I think it is the purposefulness in the way it's shot and the way that the dialogue is delivered, and I think it really needed to be reconsidered. And after that scene, it has one of the most anticlimactic endings I have seen in a movie in quite some time. And once again, as I said earlier on in the review, it's just bland. I really don't see the appeal of this movie. I don't see why so many people are just praising it and acting like it's the greatest thing in the world. And I probably would never watch this movie again. So have you seen Strange Darling? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Leave me a comment down below and let me know what you thought. I thought this movie was mediocre. It has beautiful cinematography and great performances, and that is about it. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.